when we should examine one's light. Not only will we acknowledge an intelligence, but we will also discover the DNA which connects us all as one. Welcome to Light Insight with Hillis Pugh, where we dive into the mind's light. Only on Real Revolution Radio X.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Light Insight, where we dive into the mind's light. I am your host, Hillis Pugh, and today we have one of my amazing friends with us, Miss Mariah Baretta. She is a quantum healer, celestial channel, spiritual mentor, and author of her latest book, Starcrafting, which is a phenomenal book. I've read a lot of it recently, and it's definitely should be one of your go-to books in your library. So, Mariah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
So, Mariah, me knowing you personally, I'm a little biased, and I have an idea of what you already do. So for those that don't understand or know about quantum healing, because that term and phrase is being more popularized, and reading about you and knowing you've been doing it for years, a lot longer than it's been popular. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and your path to the quantum healing and how you work with different people?
Yeah, well, I started my healing journey with, it was the law of attraction, and studying that and starting to dive into human potential a little bit more. And the more I learned about that, I started studying energy dynamics, just curious as to how it worked, because I'm a very logical, whole brain person, so things have to make sense. The intuitive aspect of my life has always been really strong, and but it also has to make logical, rational sense to me. So I started studying energy dynamics in all different forms of healing modalities. When was this? This was probably 15 years ago. And that's when I started doing tarot and working with I Ching and some other oracle methodologies. And I ended up taking a Reiki Level 1 certification after I moved to New York. And then it just kind of started snowballing, the information that was coming to me. And I got Reiki certified in Reiki Level 2 as well as Master Teacher. And then I did an apprenticeship with a shaman for a year. And I have a ton of creative background, so I was a producer and a turntablist, and so I was very familiar with music, so I started studying sound healing and how sound affects the energy field, etc. And it just started expanding, so my connection to my guides and my channeling work and stuff started expanding, and I started getting information from my guides about different types of healing modalities and things to use within the healing modalities. And the quantum healing is really about working with a quantum field which exists outside of time and space, so you can work with people's energy non-locally. And so I get visuals of people's energy fields, and I work with my guides as well as other people's guides to get information about what's going on, and then I can use my consciousness to clear people's fields. I also work with tools such as sacred geometry and crystals to help hone into what I'm working on. That makes sense. That was a lot.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I want to break it down a little bit more, because you talk about people's energy fields and how you work with that particular energy. And when you speak of energy fields, are you referring to people's auras, or is that different from that?
Yeah, it's their aura, and it's how they relate to the world around them. So basically, It's an auric field, but I work with higher dimensional gateways as well, which connect people to the cosmos, to the star systems, to the sun systems, and channels like light-based energy through their bodies into the ground. This is the Metatron's Cube activation. So I work with higher dimensional gateways too, so it's not confined to just the auric field.
Amazing. So we have the auric fields, and then we have the gateways in which we are all connected to. Is also the quantum energy, the quantum healing that you work with, also inner as well, speaking in terms of people's cellular structure, their DNA, and things inside the body? Is that also included in what you do?
Yes, of course, because basically the body responds to light, like true source light, and love-based energy, which is the source of creation. So the physiology of the body responds to these emotional states. When you're fully connected to source and to light, your body, your DNA actually starts opening and repairing and rejuvenating itself. And when you're in fear and anxiety, it usually means you're cut off from source energy and you have somehow forgotten your connection to your eternal self. And that's when the DNA kind of freezes up and starts basically breaking down. And so that's the most simplistic way to put it. The energy within you and around you actually defines your physical body. It is through your consciousness, your thoughts, and your emotions that your physical body is built off of. It's what projects it, basically. So if you heal and fix the energy, then you'll heal and fix the physical life and physical body as well.
So which brings me to an interesting thought in my head, interesting question, because, being an energy practitioner as well, we always say that the energy around us, our inner self, our physical space, our physical bodies. And so just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, so would you say that someone who is lean and fit as opposed to someone who is the opposite of that, maybe a little bit overweight, maybe not in great shape, would you say that their energy field or their physical energetic space is representation of their physical appearance as well?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There's a lot of levels to this, so it's really hard to define. Like I teach about the multidimensional self. You have the spiritual level, you have the mental level, you have the emotional, and you have the physical. And they all kind of come together to create your reality, and there's many different things that there could be spiritual things going on that are teaching somebody a specific lesson, or, there's so many things that come into play that unless I speak with someone one-on-one, it's hard to define exactly what's going on, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. You really, when you work in this quantum space, to search for the root cause of one thing, it could be many things as opposed to what we initially think the root cause of this one thing could be, because it could be linked to something else, correct?
Correct, yeah. And the whole point of, my work specifically is to clear the clutter in the fields, the minds and the emotions, to help clarify things so people can see themselves with more clarity and tap into their intuition. So I don't really try to find the root issue. I try to help them find it, if that makes sense. Also, it's really about clearing the energy so they can see things about themselves with more clarity.
Yeah, and I like that because typically, being labeled as a healer, and I'm sure you get this a lot too, where people typically say to us, oh, okay, I'm a healer, and, this is what I do, and I want to be able to fix you and put you in a better feeling place, as opposed to, me or someone like you being labeled as a facilitator or a guide to where we can empower you to do this yourself. I'm just here to support you in the role of being well and to step into a place of wellness and for you to work with yourself on a higher dimension to alleviate whatever the cause is of you not feeling well.
Correct.
And so, I like what you... Go ahead.
I just think it's important that people have to take charge of that themselves, and we can aid and help. There's a lot of help that energy healers can do, but it's really up to the individual to decide, what they do and do not want, and we can help them see that. That makes sense. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's all about giving permission. And it's, the key point in any work that any energy practitioner does is having that permission. And that's key and pivotal to move forward when, working with varying levels of energy, because if someone's not ready, they're not ready,
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a paragraph or part of a paragraph in your book, Starcrafting, I would like to mention here.
Sure.
You say in the book, if the world is consciousness, we define any and all limits by our belief or lack of belief in a potential reality. Mm-hmm. We create through imagination, we create through creativity, we create through our consciousness. And I really love what you're saying here, because it really speaks to the level of awareness that we have to bring to facilitate the process of not only just creating, but creating from varying points of expansion to really allow for us not only to nurture ourselves, but to nurture others. So when you speak of the world of consciousness, and you say that we define any and all limits by our belief or lack of belief, can you go a little bit deeper in explaining that for us?
Well, basically, this is where my studies in quantum physics started, and I started applying really, I'm not a quantum physicist, but really basic fundamental principles to consciousness and spirituality, and how I kind of made logical, rational sense out of everything through that avenue. But so quantum physicists basically prove that the world is just energy. And some people say there's 0.001% mass. Some people say mass has never been proven. So we could just be dealing with only an energetic reality. Then you have the observer effect, which is basically proved that particles can behave like either mass or energy depending on whether or not they're observed, which means that the conscious awareness on a specific reality will actually collapse the potentialities into the one being observed. And then you have quantum entanglement. So these are the three principles I went off of, which basically states that once a particle or DNA or element has been entangled, any sort of energy has been entangled, it is always connected regardless of time or space. So they did experiments on DNA where they spliced the DNA and separated them, and shocked one piece of DNA and the other one reacted at the exact same time in the exact same way as if there was no space or time between them. It's like no delay or anything.
Wow.
And so this is at the quantum level, which is very different, behaves very different than our physical reality. But it is the underlying themes that are creating reality. But our conscious, our subconscious, and the collective conscious are all creating these tipping points within the quantum fields that are creating the reality that we can see, touch, taste, feel. If that makes sense.
No,
So
that makes perfect sense. Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
yeah, so clearing the limiting subconscious beliefs, as well as social conditioning, familial conditioning, and realizing what the true nature of reality is, which is consciousness, then we start having control over our life and our energy and then our experiences. But there's many different levels and layers. There's spiritual, there's mental, there's emotional, and there's physical, and they all work together to create your reality. So it's not quite as simple as, just that, but that's ultimately what it is.
Well, so I want to go back to what you said in the beginning about the physical energy, what we see versus what we can't see, just to make it a little bit simpler for other people. So
Sure.
when you say all things are energy, that's everything. It doesn't matter what it is, physical, non-physical, it's all energy, which I know and understand it to be because of my personal practice, what I experience and what I know. And for someone who's driving a car, building a house, sitting in a chair, that mass is energy. And that mass that physical representation of that mass energy is just energy moving at a different rate than the energy that we can't see, which we speak of when we talk of quantum energy or the invisible particles from infrared energy or things like that. And wouldn't you say that it's almost in alignment with the example you just gave of the DNA strand, that, if light hits it a different way, it reacts one way, or if light hits it or energy all reacts the same. It's just whether or not your consciousness is aware of that form of energy and how it populates or how it defines itself in that space.
Right, exactly. And so the process of raising your frequency too, what happens is you're able to tap into more information. So the more you raise your frequency, the more sensitive you become to all these other energetic realities around you.
Yes, definitely. You'll be able to step into different levels, different existences, if you will. And what I appreciate, too, is this example that we gave, especially when you talk about your book, about the different levels of consciousness. Now, would you say, or would you agree that, and I'm just speaking from my personal experiences here, that when you speak of consciousness or subconsciousness, would you just say that consciousness or subconsciousness is a different level of awareness? For example, consciousness, we are aware of things that's in our field 24/7. But you speak in your book, Starcrafting, and how the subconscious is more powerful. Would you say that if we focus our attention or our awareness to the subconscious, that energy, we are raising our vibration and frequency to that space to be more aware of what it is that we can create, or aware within our energetic field?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the difference between shadow areas that we kind of just have hidden trauma, wounds, etc. The way that you clear and heal those is by bringing them into your conscious awareness and processing them. So let me know if I'm answering this question correctly. But basically the subconscious mind has been programmed since the time pre-birth. So I don't know if you got to that point in my book, but they've done hypnosis of people pre-birth, so when they were in womb, and they could recall accurate information about what the parents were experiencing and things that happened with detail that were actually confirmed. That's when the subconscious mind starts getting programmed, pre-birth to 6 or 7. So those early childhood situations that are actually defining the life of the child moving forward. And a lot of times those are really painful, traumatic experiences, as well as the cultural situations that define us. A lot of kids are really open spiritually and have a lot more spiritual experiences and are really wise, and it's almost programmed out of them. But so the goal is to kind of clear any programming you have, get back to that authentic light-based being, and program the subconscious mind into the life that you want. So like if you have a lot of financial blocks or blocks with relationships, it could be a subconscious belief system that you hold from a wound or something in early childhood. I'm not sure if I tapped on the question correctly, but...
No, and you did, and it opened up another point too, because I can't remember what book it was, but I remember reading that the soul. So actually, it brings up to when it incarnates into a child, it can incarnate into the fetus, at conception, or it can wait until, the fetus is healthy enough, which is typically like around 6 months, 8 months, before it is, fully developed and integrated into the physical body of the fetus. And during this time, it's really sensitive and it's really opening up to the energies and surroundings. But if I'm recalling this correctly, that the soul, in the process of incarnating into the physical body, can choose when to incarnate, and if it wants to incarnate into this body. And so it's all these choices from incarnation until young childhood to like 2, 3, and then after that it goes into another phase of both physical and soul development. And so I guess what I'm getting at here is when we are in this preconceived to conception to the soul being introduced into the body, it goes through this whole entire process. And then what it's bringing me back to now is, what is it? As I like to call the soul's pre-selection choice. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this, but I remember having this dream very vividly years ago, where I asked my soul, like, okay, what is the process for me to incarnate? And so I vividly saw myself inside of this purple bubble, and it's what on what we would call like a TV or view screen, there was glimpses of each life that could have happened, and so do I want life A, life B, or life C? And in that life selection process, I chose this life. And so when you go through the whole process, from selection to conception to being present, wouldn't you say that it's almost like a quantum entanglement, that everything is happening at the same time, everything is all one in this unified field? It's just our level of awareness of it that defines it or makes it happening in our life now.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it is. And basically, and of course this is just my opinion, there's no proof to any of this, but we're all source energies, and that chose to kind of individuate and experience itself from a different perspective. So if you think about it from that point of view, every single person is the one consciousness experiencing life from a different perspective. And so, of course, you could pick and choose what type of life you want to experience, who your parents are, What are the challenges you need to move through? You know, what are the experiences you want to have in that? And so it is all, if quantum entanglement is as they say it is, which it is because they've proven it time and time again, then we're all entangled, right? So everything we do and experience is coming from that one reality, but different perspectives.
Yeah, and I love that because, you know, we walk through life understanding through example that we are individuals having experiences that are similar that others can relate to, or having experiences that either isolate us or bring us together. And so when we go through these processes, these thoughts of singling yourself out or wanting to make yourself unique and have your own unique experiences, do you feel in the presence, or do you feel in the quantum space that this is doing more harm when someone is trying to, or has pulled away, or has created separation from that particular belief, or is it, you know, wanting to just simply allow for something different and better?
From the belief that we're all one?
No, you're separate from the belief that we're all one, yeah.
Well, I think that's kind of the point of it. The point of it is to experience whatever you want or need to experience. And coming back to the idea that we're all one consciousness, there is no judgment. It's just an experience that everyone gets to choose. You know, does it do more harm than good? It depends on what your goals are. You know, what are you trying to achieve? There could be a lot of lessons in the separation that somebody needs to experience. Do you know what I'm saying? And so ultimately there should be no judgment on that. But realistically, I think most people want to live a happy, healthy, abundant life because that's what brings you more joy. So if that's your goal, then you would have more suffering and pain in a reality based in separation than you would in one based in unity.
This is true, and I appreciate that you really speak to the judgment aspect of it, because we're living in a world today where everybody is judging everybody, and everybody is creating a new label for this, a new label for that, you know. And in a world with so many labels, how can you not experience separation or anxiety or fear or stress and all these other things when the ultimate desire is to be included? But how can you now, I guess, include yourself with all of these different labels, or redefining what oneness is that's being thrown around? You know, especially with the work that you do. I'm sure.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like not getting pulled into mass consciousness and beliefs. There's a lot of manipulation happening, and when this is so I do my Metatron's cube activation. Most people's higher gateways are closed or distorted. Once I open and clear those, and almost everyone that's come to me for those is having pretty serious anxiety issues. But once those are open and cleared, they're like a different person. They don't fear so much. They don't feel that sense of separation. They don't feel that sense of anxiety because they're connected to Source more strongly, and Source light. So the point is to clear, and this is energetic, is to clear the energy of all the stuff that's not authentically you. So that's fears, that's doubts, that's anxiety, that's other people's beliefs, systems, etc. So you can see yourself with more clarity, which you are you are source energy, like you're essentially God, and as is everyone else. So there really is no difference, energetically speaking. So if you can come back to that and center in that truth and understand that on some level, then everything that's going on really can't affect you unless you allow it to. And that comes back to your consciousness, which could be subconscious also. So do you see how many levels there are to it? But it's really about seeing yourself with more clarity and not allowing the external world to define who you are.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. And I really appreciate the fact that you said some of my favorite 3 words is that I am God. And with that, we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what that means, that affirmation, that very powerful affirmation of I am God. And we'll be right back with Mariah.
Sounds good.
Whether it's coming from the world of entertainment, integrative medicine, quantum theory, conspiracy facts, ancient archaeology, sacred geometry, financial trends, or perhaps even from the very world of self-help and motivational speaking, Real Revolution Radio possesses the information you need. Listen today to our daily inspiring lineup of podcast radio talk shows, only on realrevolutionradio.com.
Today to the Marine Show, where we will introduce you to the world of alternative remedies. Join Marine Pisani as she hosts discussions with leading experts in the fields of hypnotherapy, acupuncture, yoga, Ayurveda, EFT, chronic healing, integrative medicine, and so much more. Marine will also brave topics that many consider taboo. Yes, taboo talk. Tune in today to the Marine Show, heard on popular social media and now on Smart TV. It's a mindfulness radio production only on realrevolutionradio.com.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cleveland, we now have liftoff to a higher level of consciousness. Tune in to realrevolutionradio.com, the #1 source for independent music and inspirational podcast radio. Awaken, evolve, inspire, and join the evolution only on realrevolutionradio.com.
You're listening to realrevolutionradio.com. There's hope as long as you're alive.
And welcome back. So before we went to break, Mariah spoke one of my favorite affirmations, that I am God. And, you say that today, sometimes I've gotten a little flack for it, of people, of me even putting it on social media, saying that affirmation, whether if it's in a video, whether if it's on one of my posts, that I am God. And especially people who are very religious, very Christian-oriented, or some evangelists, they believe that God is this higher being, this higher power, which it is. And God is also this higher being that is you, that lives in you, that is the many things of you. So, Mariah, can you tell me what that statement means to you and how it relates to you and your work?
Well, if we go back to what I was speaking about before, as all of us being, a part of source energy, basically we're like streams of source energy incarnating to experience our individuated self. And then we go back to quantum entanglement. There's no other realistic explanation besides the fact that you are God.
So
is that too simple?
Yeah, no, it's just that simple. I am God. So would you even go as far as to say that I am God and a dog, and I am God representing that dog, or I'm God representing that cat, or I'm God representing this chair that I'm sitting on, I'm God representing this plant? Would you go as far as to say that God is the representation of the energy, the source energy of oneness, is both the inanimate and animate energies on this planet? Speaking, when I say animate, I mean plants, birds, all living things, and non-living things.
Yeah, I would, because, like I spoke about at the beginning, is everything's consciousness. And if we are creating the reality around us with our consciousness, and we are God, then everything else would also have to be God. And
so
go ahead.
No, and that's would you even go as far as to say that everything is consciousness, that even the non-living things without consciousness at one point was consciousness and was living, and so as a result, they are also God to some degree?
Well, I think they are consciousness. I think everything is consciousness. And the quantum, the double slit experiment that I spoke about, that talked about the particle and the wave, the observer effect that collapsed that reality was actually a video camera recording it, was the observer, and it changed the reality by observing it. Does that make sense?
Wow.
So,
yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so that's the question is.
And so you even talk about what I find very interesting in your book, Starcrafting, and the quote, this one paragraph, quote, reads, "The tipping point is when critical mass is reached and things shift irreversibly. This happens when the microcosm as well as the macrocosm as well as the microcosm, your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, etc., build energy within the quantum field. When the energy reaches critical mass, that is when you see things begin to manifest the real world or external world." So would you say that, since we're on this subject of, I am God, would you kind of say that once the conscious thought of people wanting to believe that they are their own higher power, that they are the God energy and represented in an individuated soul, is going to be that tipping point where people get to see and things get to change, and everything will soon have a collective conscious belief of oneness?
When more people, I think the collective consciousness shift that's what it is. It's like we've been giving our power away our entire existence, being told that we are being judged by an external force and that we don't actually have as much control. But when the abilities of the human, the spiritual expansiveness are literally limitless, because we are consciousness. If we can hone into that power and utilize our self-awareness, that's the difference between like an object or an animal and a human, is we're self-aware and we can go back and we can heal and we can change and we can shift, because we're not purely being run off the subconscious mind. But once we waken up to the fact that we can actually create by our thoughts and our emotions on a collective level, then through quantum entanglement, our energy and our thoughts and our emotions will start shifting the fields, which is already happening. And we can actually step into our power as the God self that we are.
I love that. And so since we're talking about, people finding their way to reach that space, not only, within themselves, to add to the energy of collective consciousness. Your book, Starcrafting, I read a good portion of it, and I still have a little ways to go. But from what I read of it, it's almost like a guide or a how-to book for people to find themselves to that space. Is that how you define this book?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It was meant, because that's my experience with my creative arts. I just was always creating. I couldn't stop creating, and fashion, music, art, and part of that was healing. I think the majority of that was my own self-healing, just processing stuff, writing, And then I got into the healing work and the consciousness expansion and the meditation and the multidimensional travel. But that's 40 years experience. So what this is a way for people to go inward and explore their consciousness and their mind, as well as process with the creative process, and then to liberate themselves from any limiting beliefs or judgments about what they can and can't do. But that's exactly what it is a guide through that process, and to help people see their potential and their capabilities, Yeah,
I like how you have laid it out. It's very simple for people to truly understand how to empower themselves and how to really understand who they are in the energy that's happening, because now we're in, post 2012, and now the world is shifting, the world is changing, and all this contrast is showing up in the world. And I know and I feel that this book is a great guide to help them with that. And in the first half of our interview, you talked about you started off with the law of attraction, which is one of the 7 spiritual laws, or as I know it to be now, the law of vibration, in which the law of attraction comes out of. So how has the law of attraction, or the law of vibration rather, how has that really defined your path in the quantum energy work that you do?
Well, because if you are just energy and you're creating your reality with your consciousness, which is just energy, then the more you can clear and purify your energy, the more spiritual power you have to define your life, I guess. So if you heal the subconscious mind and the hidden wounds and blocks and energetic issues within your field, and you purify your field, then you can create your reality consciously, intentionally, and faster than you can if you have a lot of other chaos going on, because it's just back and forth, under the scenes that you don't even know is going on. So the healing process is really important to work with the law of attraction, law of vibration, and manifestation, because if you're always trying to create or manifest something, but you have a block or a frequency in your field, your belief systems, that frequency can't actually be attracted to you. Does that make sense? So the healing process has to happen to clear everything so that you can consciously create.
And when you find yourself, let's say someone's read the book, they've gone through the processes, they cleared everything, and they started attracting, started manifesting, started doing all these things, and things are great, and then things start clogging up again. What would you say to someone who's on this path and they've been through whatever they experienced and things are good and things start clogging up again? How would you help that individual to unblock what was previously blocked?
I feel like it's just a process, and that so a lot of times you have to clear the past life stuff, childhood wounds and traumas, but you have to maintain that energy. And then I do believe there's always higher spiritual truths, higher spiritual things that are happening. And beyond that, if we go just to the energy and the quantum physics of it, there could have been something that happened a month or two, a year or two before that is now coming to the surface to be handled, that was produced or created in the conscious or subconscious mind. So it's really about maintenance and holding these frequencies. So maintaining, allowing your emotions to clear and heal, as well as maintaining, positivity, love, and light. So that, the dips, that's just human nature. You're going to go up and you're going to go down. And you could, whatever you're experiencing now, you created in the past, right?
Right, and so when this stuff comes up after we do, all this work, probably spend hundreds of dollars on the self-nurturing, as I call it, and everything's just all peachy, do you find that sometimes that if someone's not willing to go deep enough or not willing to go even to past life stuff, do you often see there's a recurring theme in their life as opposed to just dealing with all surface issues?
Yeah, I feel like there's always more to process and heal. And I know I spoke about that in my book, too. If we were all perfectly healthy and knew our potential on our light, we'd be living in a totally different reality. So there's always going to be stuff to clear. And what's going to come up is what you're ready to deal with. And then things might be smooth, and then more might come up. And it's not linear. It's spiral, And the way I've described it before is, every time you come back around the circle in the spiral, you're going to re-experience that till it's totally healed. And when that's totally healed, you'll start a new spiral, and you'll stop experiencing it. But it's going to come up and be processed in doses that you can handle, and you can process and you can clear if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said about it not being linear because, I don't know how everyone else feels who's listening, but, growing up, I often thought that life is linear. We're born, we live life, we die, that's it, But as my spiritual path evolved, I was like, wait a minute, this is a routine. This is something familiar. This is something new but not different. And, as I got further on my path, I began to learn that everything is a spiral. Everything is cyclical, that everything comes back around, even fashion, haircuts.
Right, yeah, exactly.
All these things. Whether it's our a level of awareness that we bring to it that makes it stands out in that. And, part of the whole quantum energy is also the experience of deja vu, which is also like, okay, wait, I've seen this happened before, but what's the significance of it? And so when you say that when people have these moments of recognizing the repeat moments or recognizing a familiar energy, what would you say to them to really help them to understand why it's happening again and understand why this stuff is repeating again in their life?
Well, it totally depends on the person, and like I've said, the level that it's happening at, and I can get to that on an individual basis. But in general, I would say there's just pieces that still need to be cleared and healed, and it's just coming up for you to become aware of it and process it. So through my sound healing work I've done before, or that I don't do it as much now that I've done the quantum healing, but the sound, you can use dissonant sounds to break up energetic blocks in someone's field. And what happens is you play these dissonant sounds, and the memory of the traumatic experience or the wound or whatever that block was composed of, as it dissolves, the memory comes up to the surface of the person, the client. And then I actually have to push that energy back into the physical body for the body to process and then release. And that's the healing of the energetic block through sound. which sounds counterintuitive, but you have to become aware of it and process it. That's why emotions have to flow. If you push your emotions down and don't deal with them, they can get stuck in your field. So that's what's happening, is it's coming to the surface for them to acknowledge, to honor, to learn, and to love themselves through it. That makes sense, because it's really about self-love and acceptance.
That makes perfect sense. And so would you say, because I know you talk about it in your book as well, would you say for someone who may not have access to sound healing or any particular frequencies, would you say that writing and being in touch with the emotions as you write is just as effective?
Yeah, that's what the book was about, the creative process too. So the creative process is non-judgment. So writing, dancing, you can move through emotions. That's a great way to do it. Painting, some sort of visual art, so you have the color, the shape, the texture, the feeling, and you put it out there for yourself to see and to process. But writing is a great way, writing and dancing both. And you allow yourself to feel what you need to feel and allow those emotions and those energies to move through you. So any of those ways, and I think everybody's going to deal with that differently, going to resonate with things differently. So.
Yeah, there's one technique that you talk about in your book that I absolutely love and find it fascinating is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's being the observer. And it's this meditation technique that you talk about where someone sits in meditation and they begin to visualize themselves outside of the body, and then they slowly walk around their body to become familiar with their body and the energy as separate energies, but also one that's at the same time. Can you talk more about that technique?
That's just to help people perceive their energy and get more familiar and begin to trust themselves more on what they're feeling and intuiting about their own physical body and their own being, because their energy is a part of their being. And a lot of people only believe things they see and experience. So changing perspectives and seeing themselves from a different perspective, I think, is a really powerful way to work with the energy field, because it just gives you a new perspective, basically.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because we primarily see ourselves in one way, and how you describe it is we kind of see ourselves as an observer anyway, because we see ourselves with our own eyes unless we're looking into a mirror, because we see ourselves from the first-person vantage point, meaning that we only see our hands, we see our feet. We don't really see us until we look into a mirror physically. And so this technique, this exercise that you talk about of a different point of view, a different perspective, I think will really help a lot of people to really actually see themselves in a different way and open up to a new level of expansion, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
And so who would you say you wrote this book for? Is it more for beginners, intermediate, advanced, people on their journeys?
The intention is for everyone to be able to take something from it. I would say the meditative stuff is probably more advanced. However, I've worked with people that have never meditated before that are able to do the meditations in the book and the practices in the book. So the intention was to reach whoever it needed to reach, and the hopes that anyone that reads it will be able to pull something from it to utilize on their healing path, as well as being a guide that they can keep with them. And I have a lot of books that I bought and I read and they made no sense to me. And then I revisited them a few years later and was like, that's why I bought that book then, because at that point in time when I decided to read it, it made sense. Does that make sense? So you can always go back to these things as you practice and develop and put them back into practice and see if they resonate later. I think I did mention that in the book too.
Yeah, and I definitely have a few books in my library that I still reference from time to time, especially when it comes to understanding different energies and different energy fields and how things are shifting and changing and how things are evolving now. And and what I find fascinating too is that everything in your book is simple, that everyone can understand it. And, when you have techniques and tools that are simple that everyone can use as a reference, it's definitely going to be life-changing for a lot of people because it is simple. And when you have something that's simple, a lot of people can gravitate to it.
Right. Yeah. That's what the hopes are. But.
Yeah, and your story, your life story, I learned so much about you in this book.
Oh.
I'm like, wait, she was a gymnast, she was this, she was that. Oh my goodness, what hasn't this woman done, And so, I think a lot of people will really appreciate you sharing a lot of your backstory because, we all start from the same place.
Right.
And one of the things that really caught my attention of you sharing your backstory was the moment when you had sleep paralysis.
Oh, yeah.
And you were trying to get back into your body. And I find it interesting that how, when you talk about this piece and how you were trying to enter into your body and you couldn't because of this, I believe it was like you tell the story.
Well, I had sleep paralysis quite a bit throughout my life, and I never remembered what I experienced. I just remembered trying to gain access to my body, and I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't open my eyes. And so I just kind of go wander around somewhere, like my, astral form would go wander around somewhere for a while, and then I'd try to get back in. And then if it took too long, I'd end up trying to call someone telepathically, and this happened quite a few times, and somebody would call me and I'd wake up and I'd get out of it. But this time I was calling people and trying to get back in, and it just wasn't happening. And so I kind of threw up my arms and I said, I guess I'll go break her out. And I didn't even know what I was talking about because I didn't ever remember where my astral form had been and why I couldn't get back into my body. So I found myself in this mall-like space, and there was a blank-faced man in a tan suit with a top hat, and I was furious because they had been holding my astral form hostage. So I started walking towards him aggressively. I grew to be about 9 feet tall. My head was touching the ceiling. He didn't move, didn't budge. And then I spoke about this in my book, which I'm not going to say now, but I kind of threatened him. And then I looked at my arms, and they turned into blue dragon wings. And within a few minutes, I sprayed this white cosmic dust out into the landscape, and then within seconds I woke up. And
I love that.
I knew that was an actual real experience because of my multidimensional travel work I'd done and my past experience with sleep paralysis, as well as my soul fragmenting because I had came back so fast, which I had to do
Oh, geez. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about, too. I have to have you on again because we're almost out of time. It's the soul fragmentation. But you can read about that in Mariah's book, too, about how to retrieve soul fragments on your own. And I tell you, it's a very empowering thing to do because I've done it and even still do it when I tend to travel far outside of my body.
Yeah. The soul retrieval, yeah.
Yeah, and I like how you said it because I never knew that upon entering or upon returning that if you do it too quickly that you can lose a piece of yourself.
I didn't know that either. I think it could have been the entire situation, you know, and like I had to literally break myself out of there. But, yeah, I wasn't aware of that either. But it's good. It's a good skill to have, the soul retrieval, because it's very healing, both on the, you know, the child self, and if that happens throughout your life, you can reintegrate more easily, you know. So
Definitely. And so, Mariah, if anyone wants to work with you or want to purchase your book, where can they find that information at?
Everything's available on my website at onepreciouslight.com. And the book is just available on Amazon right now.
Yay. And I will have all the links posted under the show notes for those who are wanting to connect with Mariah and have any more information about her and all the fabulous work that she does. And believe me when I say she's fabulous, I have worked with her. We have worked together, this beautiful soul.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
No, thank you. Thank you for having time to be on Light and Sight today. And once again, for anyone who wants to reach out or connect with Mariah, her website is onepreciouslight.com. And I look forward to having you on the show again, Mariah, because we have to do this because there's so much more to talk about.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and you have an amazing, insightful day.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised, but heard instead, dear listeners, through podcast radio on realrevolutionradio.com. Never before has inspirational podcast radio been taken to this next level of wow. Until now. Today, in the age of information, more and more people are searching for answers and in solutions in how to better approach and perceive every day-to-day concerns by tuning in to realrevolutionradio.com. Isn't it about time we take back our lives, back in consciousness, in a higher state of awareness, in the evolution of our own state of higher well-being? Yes, we can do so consciously every day by tuning in to the many groundbreaking and third eye-opening podcasts. Our new Cleveland-based network of over 33 paradigm-shifting internet talk shows. Only on realrevolutionradio.com. Be part of that change. Evolve. Be inspired.